Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses as we continue with Part 11, the Essenes and Therapeutae from The Philosophy of Fire by R. Swinburne Clymer. The Essenes and Therapeutae. The order of the Essenes in the time of Jesus constituted the final remnant of those brotherhoods of prophets believed to have been organized by Samuel. The despotism of the rulers of Palestine, the jealousy of an ambitious and servile priesthood, had forced them to take refuge in silence and solitude. They no longer struggled as did their predecessors, but contented themselves with preserving their traditions. They had two principal centers, one in Egypt on the banks of Lake Maoris, the other in Palestine, at Engaddi, near the Dead Sea. The name of Essenes, which they had adopted, came from the Syrian word Assaya, a physician. In Greek, therapeutis, for their only acknowledged ministry with regard to the public was that of healing diseases both physical and moral. They studied with great diligence certain medical writings dealing with the occult virtue of plants and minerals. It is chiefly due to the Syrian word Assaya that the mistake is made in regard to the Essenes and the Therapeutae. The Therapeutae was a branch of the Essenes, of lesser degrees and with different duties. The fact that the name of the order was derived from the Syrian induced Dr. P.B. Randolph to journey to Syria while in the Orient, to investigate whether there might be a possibility of the Essenians being a branch of some still older order, and proved of vast importance to him and his work, finding as he did the source of the mystical knowledge now known as the Unsireth. The branch known as the Therapeutae had their home chiefly on Lake Maoris near Alexandria. This branch had colonies in other places. Like the parent body, the Essenes, they lived chiefly in monasteries and were very moderate with regard to dress and food. They prayed at sunrise, having their faces turned to the east, studied the secret doctrine and greater mysteries of antiquity. They differed from the Essenes in that they lived a contemplative life. While the Essenes followed many useful occupations such as agriculture, art, science, etc., the Essenes lived together in common. The Therapeutae often lived separately and alone. The Therapeutae, being of the outer degree, knew none of the divisions that marked the several degrees of initiation of the inner circle, the Essenes. Both branches resembled the Pythagoreans, and the teachings were almost identical. Neither used animal food, and both the inner and outer admitted women to their assemblies and even to certain of the degrees. The Essenes, living a more active life, bore a very important and, though secret, part in the development of Judaism. John the Baptist belonged to their ranks before Jesus was admitted. Some of the members possessed the gift of prophecy, as Menahem, who had prophesied to Herod that he should reign. They served God with great piety, not by offering victims, but by sanctifying the soul. Avoiding towns, they devoted themselves to the arts of peace. Not a single slave was among them. They were all free and worked for one another. The rules of the order were very strict, as was necessary in such times. To be admitted to enter, a year's novitiate was necessary. If one had given sufficient proofs of temperance, he was then permitted to receive the ablutions, though without entering into relations with the masters of the order. Tests extending over another 2 years were necessary before being received into the Brotherhood. They took the sacred vow to observe the rules of the order and to betray none of its secrets. Then only did they participate in the common repasts, which were celebrated with great solemnity and constituted the inner worship of the Essenes. The garments they had worn during these repasts they looked upon as sacred and to be removed before resuming work. These fraternal love feasts, after which was patterned the supper instituted by Jesus later on, began and ended with prayer. The interpretation of the sacred books of Moses and the prophets was here given, but the explanations of the texts allowed of 3 significations. All this wonderfully resembled the organization of the Pythagoreans, having been almost the same amongst all the ancient prophets, for it is identical in spirit, if not entirely in form, wherever true initiation has ever existed. The Essenes professed the essential dogma of the Orphic and Pythagorean doctrine, that of the pre-existence of the soul, the consequence and reason of its immortality. The soul, descending from the most subtle ether and attracted into a body by certain desires, remains there as in a prison. freed from the bonds of the body as from a long servitude, when it has worked out its own salvation, joyfully takes its flight. Among the Essenes, the brothers, properly so called, lived under a community of property and in a condition of celibacy, not because they believed that to be the best state for man, but because experience had taught them man could seldom live harmoniously when married and continue his care and instruction of women. There were married Essenes, but these formed a separate class, did not teach, and were under subjection of the others. Silent, gentle, and grave, they were to be met with here and there, cultivating the arts of peace. Carpenters, weavers, vine planters, or gardeners, never gunsmiths or merchants, scattered in small groups about the whole of Palestine and in Egypt, even as far as Mount Horeb, they offered one another the most complete hospitality. Thus we see Jesus and his disciples journeying from town to town and from province to province, and always certain of finding shelter and lodging. They obeyed the laws of true initiation. Do unto others as you would that they should do unto you. The Essenes were of an exemplary morality. They forced themselves to suppress passion and anger, transmuting it into love, always benevolent, peaceable, and trustworthy. Their word was more powerful than an oath, which in ordinary life they looked upon as superfluous and almost perjury. They endured the most cruel tortures with admirable steadfastness of soul and smiling countenance, rather than violate the slightest religious precept. Indifferent to the outward pomp of worship at Jerusalem, repelled by the harshness of the Sadducees and the prayers of the Pharisees, as well as by the pedantry of the synagogue, as these were merely forms without soul. From the Essenes, Jesus received what they alone could give him, the esoteric traditions of the prophets, and by its means his own historical and religious tendency or trend. He was shown how wide was the gulf that separated the official Jewish doctrine from the ancient wisdom of the initiates, the veritable mother of religion, though ever persecuted by Satan, by the spirit of evil, of egotism, hatred, pride of form, and denial, allied with absolute political power and priestly imposture. He learned that Genesis, under the seal of its symbolism, concealed a theogony and a cosmogony as far removed from the literal signification as is the profoundest truth of science from a child's fable. He contemplated the days of Elohim, or the eternal creation, by emanation of the elements and the formation of the worlds, the origin of the floating souls, and their return to God by progressive existences or generations of Adam. He was taught the grandeur of the thoughts of Moses, whose intention had been to prepare the religious unity of the nations by establishing the worship of the one God and incarnating this idea into a people. He was instructed in the doctrine of the divine word, already taught by Krishna in India, by the priests of Osiris, by Orpheus and Pythagoras in Greece, and known to the prophets under the name of the mysteries of the Son of Man and of the Son of God. According to this doctrine, the highest manifestation of God is man, who, in constitution, form, organs, and intelligence, is the image of the universal being, whose faculties he possesses and whose powers he may develop if he will. In the earthly evolution of humanity, however, God is scattered, split up, and mutilated, so to speak, in the multiplicity of men and of human imperfections. In it he struggles, suffers, and tries to find himself. He is the Son in man, the perfect man, the man type, the profoundest thought of God, remaining hidden in the infinite abyss of his desires and power. At certain epochs, when humanity is to be saved from some terrible gulf and set on a higher plane, a chosen one identifies himself with divinity, attracts it to himself by strength, wisdom, and love, and manifests it anew to man. Then divinity, by the virtue and breath of the Spirit, is completely present in him. The Son of Man then becomes the Son of God and his living word. In other ages and among other nations there have already appeared sons of God, but since Moses, none had arisen in Israel. All the prophets were expecting this Messiah. The seers even said that this time he will call himself the Son of Woman, of the heavenly Isis, of the divine light, which is the bride of God, soul with God. For the light of love would shine in him. All these secrets which the patriarch of the Essenes unfolded to the young Galilean on the solitary banks of the Dead Sea in lonely Engaddi seemed to him wonderful, but yet known. It was with no ordinary emotion that he heard the chief of the order comment on the words still to be read in the books of Enoch. From the beginning the Son of Man was in the mystery. The Father kept him near his mighty presence and manifested him to his elect. But the kings shall be afraid and shall prostrate themselves to the ground with terror when they shall see the Son of Woman seated on the throne of his glory. Then the elect shall summon all the forces of heaven, all the saints from on high and the power of God, and the cherubim, the seraphim, the Ophanim, all the angels of might, all the angels of the Lord, that is, of the elect, and of the other might, serving on earth and obey the waters, shall raise their voices. A history of the philosophers would not be complete without dwelling on the Essenian order, because the ancient mysteries and the secret doctrine took another form after the initiation of Jesus, who became the Christ. Their teachings are therefore of vital importance and show that the Essenian fraternity fully understood the instructions and training of all other orders and religious beliefs. Moreover, that the Essenian order was merely a continuation of the older schools under a new name. The fundamental doctrine regarding initiation taught by the Essenes differed but slightly from that of the ancient mysteries. This doctrine was that the union of God with the soul, which is to become illuminated, is the principle of all mystic life. But this union, the fullness and final consummation of which cannot be experienced till death has been passed through and eternity has been achieved, can be accomplished on this earth in a more or less perfect manner. And the literature of the ancient secret doctrine has no other end in view than to unveil to us, by a full and profound analysis of the different stages of evolution in the soul of man, the diverse successive degrees of this divine union. 7 distinct stages of the soul's ascent towards God have always been recognized by the mystics, and they constitute what has been emblematically called the castle of the interior man. They represent the 7 absolute processes of soul development and of illumination or transfiguration. The first link in this arcane sequence is called the state of prayer, which, from the pneumatic standpoint, is the concentration of the intellectual energies upon God as the object of thought, which is commonly assisted by the ceremonial appeal made by religion to the senses. It has, however, a higher aspect comprised in the second evolutionary process called the state of mental prayer. Here, the illusionary phenomena of the visible world are regarded as informed with the inner pneumatic significance, to divine which is the chief end of mysticism. In order to make progress therein, and so attain the third stage, it is necessary that the aspirant, shaping all practical life in conformity with this theory, should perform no outward act except with a view to its inward meaning, all things which are of time and earth, and man being simply figures and symbols of earth and heaven and God. The postulant, as he advances, will perceive that the inmost thoughts of his own conscious being are only a limited and individual speculation of the speech or word of God, concealed even in its apparent revelation, and itself a veil of the divine truth which must be removed for the contemplation of the truth absolute, which is behind it. When he has reached this point, the mystic will have entered the third stage of his growth. The next step is the most difficult of all. It is termed by mystics the obscure night, and here it is necessary that the aspirant become stark naked. That means he should empty himself completely, should be stripped of all his faculties, renouncing all his own predilections, his own thoughts, his own will, in a word, his whole self, and take upon himself that of the divine will. Aridity, weariness, temptation, desolation, darkness are characteristic of this epoch, and these have been experienced by all who have ever made any progress in the mysteries of mystical love. The fourth condition is denominated the prayer of quietism. Complete immolation of self and unreserved surrender into the hands of God have repose as their first result. Such quietism, however, is not to be confounded with insensibility or negativeness, for it leads to the soul's real activity, to that which has God for its impulse. The fifth degree in the successive spiritualization of the human soul is called the state of union, in which the will of man and the will of God become substantially identical. This is the mystical irrigation which fertilizes the garden of the soul. During this portion of his development, the neophyte, imbued with a sovereign disdain of all things material as well as of himself, accomplishes in peace, serenity, and joy of spirit the will of God, supernaturally speaking, within himself. On the extreme further limit of this condition, the mystic enters the sixth state, which is that of ecstatic prayer, the soul's transport above and outside itself. It constitutes a union with divinity by the instrument of positive love, which is a state of sanctification, beatitude, and ineffable torrents of delight flowing over the whole being. It is beyond description, it transcends illustration, and its felicity is not to be conceived. Love, which is a potency of the soul, or of the anima which vivifies our bodies, has passed into the spirit of the soul, into its superior, divine, and universal form, and this process completed comprises the seventh and final state of pneumatic development, which is that of ravishment. Renouncing all that is corporeal about it, the soul becomes a pure spirit, capable of being united in a holy celestial manner to the uncreated spirit, whom it beholds, loves, serves, adores above and beyond all created forms. This is the mystic marriage, the perfect union and entrance of God and heaven into the interior of man. See the chemical marriage of Christian Rosenkreutz in the Rosicrucians, their teachings. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe and comment, and if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Roses. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.